The air inside the rust-hollow courthouse was dry as parchment and just as brittle. Sunlight poured through the warped window panes, casting long golden bars across the floor, as if the room itself held judgment in its grasp. At the center of it stood Eleanor Granger, her shoulders straight despite the fraying edges of her dress and the sweat that clung to her brow. Her eyes, gray and steady, met the judge's without flinching. She hadn't spoken once since the proceedings began. On the bench, Judge Nathaniel Howe leaned forward, scratching at the corner of his beard with a lazy finger. He wore the kind of expression that suggested his mind was already made up. It had been from the moment she walked in. To his right, Jeb Danton lounged with his boots up on the table, a smirk carved deep into his weathered face. A rich man's confidence radiated off him like heat from desert stone, born not of truth, but of ownership. "I don't think we need waste more time," Danton drawled, loud enough for the room to hear. "She was seen leading 2 of my best mares out of my north paddock 3 nights back. My foreman, my ranch hand, and even old Widow Boone saw it. You got half the town here who'd swear by it." Several in the audience nodded, though none would meet Eleanor's eyes. Her hands remained clasped in front of her, calm, still, like the eye of a storm that had yet to break. "She's a widow, Judge," Danton went on, voice slick with false pity. "Times are hard. She's got mouths to feed. I don't hold that against her. I'm just asking the law to do what it's meant to do." The judge grunted. He leaned forward and studied Eleanor like one might a mule suspected of lameness. "Do you have anything to say in your defense, Mrs. Granger?" The question floated there, slow and deliberate. The courtroom, packed with dusty faces, waited for her answer. Eleanor opened her mouth, then shut it again. She had spoken the truth already. To the sheriff, to the clerk, to anyone who would bother to listen. The horses hadn't been on Danton's land when she found them. They were wandering, marked with no brand, abandoned in the hills east of her claim. She'd taken them in, fed them, kept them alive. It wasn't theft. It was survival. But men like Danton didn't need facts. They had friends with guns, and friends in robes. She lowered her gaze for a moment, then looked back to the judge. "I've got nothing else to say," she said quietly. A murmur ran through the crowd. The judge gave a slow nod, already reaching for his gavel. "Then I'll render." The doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open, hard enough to rattle the shutters. Every head turned. The sheriff flinched. Someone gasped. The man who walked and moved with the weight of dust and years behind him. A long duster swept around his boots, thick with trail grime. His hat was pulled low, but not low enough to hide the scar that ran from his right eye down through his cheek, pink and angry. He was tall, but not in the way of proud men. More like a shadow grown long at dusk. Eleanor felt her heart skip, though she didn't know why. The stranger walked straight to the center of the courtroom, where Eleanor stood. He said nothing for a moment, only looked at her as if measuring her soul. Then he turned to the judge. "She's my wife," he said. The silence was total. Judge Howe blinked. Danton's smirk vanished. The room shifted like cattle sensing a thunderstorm. "Excuse me," the judge said. The man nodded once. "Married 5 years, in Arizona Territory. Lost track of each other in the war." Danton stood, voice rising like a snake hiss. "That's a lie. She's lived here for 10 years. Her husband was a marshal, dead and buried." The stranger's eyes moved to him, slow and without warmth. "Dead men sometimes have brothers." It wasn't an answer, not really, but it made the judge hesitate. The stranger turned back to Eleanor and took her hand. She didn't flinch, though her breath was shallow. Something in his grip wasn't cruel. It was deliberate. "She didn't steal your horses," he said to the judge. "They were mine. Brought them back from Texas last month. She was keeping them for me." The gavel hovered in the judge's hand, uncertain now. Danton stepped forward. "Who the hell are you really?" The man didn't answer. He only stared. And Danton, a man used to command and swagger, stopped moving like a horse realizing the path ahead led straight off a cliff. "Name?" the judge asked finally. The man turned his head just enough. "Cole Maddox." If a wind had blown through the room, it couldn't have made more stir than those 2 words. A young deputy at the back of the room paled visibly. An old man near the window whispered, "Thought he was dead." "Thought a lot of things," Cole replied. The judge lowered his gavel, the handle suddenly too heavy in his hand. "We'll reconvene tomorrow," he muttered. "This court stands adjourned." As the crowd spilled out in a rustle of whispers and darting glances, Eleanor stood frozen, her hand still in the stranger's. She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "I've never seen you before in my life." Cole Maddox didn't smile. "I know," he said, "but they needed to believe it, and you needed a name the law would listen to." Outside, the sky was turning the color of blood and bone, and in Rust Hollow, stories were already being told. The saloon stank of old liquor, sweat, and the kind of secrets that only grew heavier after sunset. Eleanor stepped in behind Cole Maddox, boots stiff on the warped floorboards. The room hushed again, as it had in the courthouse. This man brought silence with him like a cowl. She'd followed him because she had no choice. The town thought they were bound now, and if she left his side too quickly, the lie might fall apart before she understood why he told it. Cole didn't sit at the bar. He took a table in the corner where his back could kiss the wall, and his eyes could track every window and door. He placed his wide-brimmed hat beside him and motioned for Eleanor to do the same. She remained standing. "You're not my husband," she said coldly. "No," he agreed. "Didn't say I was. Said I needed to be." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't know me. You don't know me. So why lie?" Cole leaned back, one boot resting on the opposite knee, fingers tracing the rim of a tin cup the barkeep had left for him. "Because I've been waiting a long time for Jeb Danton to show his teeth," he said, "and you gave him the chance." She folded her arms. "You've got a history with him." Cole chuckled, dry and grim. "Everyone does, if they live long enough in these parts. He killed someone I loved once. A woman. Name was Anna. Tried to stand up to him over stolen land and dead cattle. He had her dragged out of her home in the middle of the night. Said she resisted. The law agreed." Eleanor's voice dropped. "I'm sorry." He nodded just once. "You don't look like her, but you sound like her. Same kind of quiet that makes men lean closer. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask for your permission." For a moment, they stared at each other, two flints sparking without flame. Then Cole stood, slow and deliberate. "Word's already spreading," he said. "By morning, half the county will believe you're Eleanor Maddox, frontier bride, which means the law can't hang you without dragging me into it. That buys time. Time for you to decide what you want next." He started for the door. She stepped in front of him. "What do you want, Cole?" He hesitated. The light hit his scar just so, like a crack in granite. "I want Danton to feel afraid again. I want to remind him there's a cost to every lie he buys. But I can't do it alone. The law's in his pocket. The town's too scared. But they'll rally around a widow with a name, especially if she becomes something more than just a victim." Eleanor's mouth twitched. "You think I'm someone they'll follow? I think you've lost more than most, and you're still standing. That counts for something." She stepped aside, letting him pass. As he reached the door, a drunk in the corner stood, glassy-eyed and muttering, "Hey, ain't you Cole Maddox?" The saloon hushed once again. Cole didn't turn around. "Depends who's asking." The drunk took a shaky step forward. "I heard you were cut down in El Paso, left to die outside a burning church." Cole's voice came like iron in the cold. "You heard wrong." The drunk hesitated, then lunged. His knife caught moonlight for a half-second before Cole moved. In a blink, the stranger pivoted, disarmed him with a twist of the wrist, and drove the man's own blade into the table between his fingers. Not a drop of blood spilled, but the message was clear. The saloon held its breath. Cole met every eye before turning back to Eleanor. "Come morning," he said. "You and I need to talk somewhere quiet. There's more at stake than horses and lies." She said nothing as he stepped out into the night. The door swung closed behind him. Back in her home, just 2 rooms and a roof that whistled when the wind picked up, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat by the window with her father's old rifle across her lap and her children tucked into the corner, unaware that their mother's name now wore a stranger's shadow. She didn't trust him. She didn't understand him. But for the first time since her husband's death, Jeb Danton hadn't looked untouchable. And that meant something. They met at dawn, where the redstone bluffs bent into the sky like broken knuckles. Eleanor had left her children with the preacher's wife, under the pretense of needing to settle matters at the court. She hadn't told them about the rifle tucked under her coat or the knife in her boot. Cole Maddox was already waiting, seated on a flat boulder, watching the horizon like it might confess something. "You came," he said without looking at her. "I didn't come for you," she replied. He nodded, as if he respected the lie. The wind tugged at her skirts, dry and sharp. From here, Rust Hollow was a distant smudge, caught between the earth's raw bones and the open sky. It felt far enough from Danton's eyes to speak plainly. "I didn't kill your husband," Cole said. "I know," Eleanor replied. He looked at her then. The scar across his face wasn't as jarring now. She'd begun to see the man beneath it, older than he looked, but steadier than anyone she'd met since the war ended. "What I don't know," she continued, "is why you think any of this ends well. Danton's got 30 hired men, most of them drunk, but armed. The sheriff owes him land, the judge owes him silence, and everyone else owes him their lives." Cole reached into his coat and tossed something between them. A silver badge. Not a new one, dented and dulled with time. "U.S. Marshal," he said. "Or I was. Until I refused to burn down a town full of miners for a railroad syndicate. They called it desertion. I called it conscience." Eleanor looked at the badge, then back at him. "You think a title gives you weight out here?" "No, but the name does. Maddox still means something in these parts. And if I raise a hand against Danton, folks might call it a grudge. But if you do, they'll call it justice." Eleanor stepped closer. "Why me?" "Because you're already what they wish they were. A widow who didn't bend, didn't run. They'll follow you if you lead. But first, they have to see Danton bleed." She didn't like it. Didn't like how natural it felt to consider bloodshed now. But Danton had sent men to threaten her farm, had leaned on the banker to call in her loan, had nearly hanged her for saving 2 starving horses. He was squeezing her like he squeezed everyone. "You sure they'll follow?" "I'm sure they'll watch," Cole said. "And sometimes that's enough." That night, they set the trap. Eleanor rode out alone to Danton's northern paddock, under a moon that looked more bone than pearl. She carried a lantern, swinging slow from the saddle, and she wore her husband's old coat, patched but familiar, just enough to make her recognizable at a distance. 2 of Danton's men were waiting by the split-rail fence, half asleep and full of whiskey. "Thought I might try and steal a few more," she called out. The first man raised his rifle. The second just laughed. "You got sand, I'll give you that." Behind them, in the bluffs, a low whistle sliced through the dark. Cole moved like a ghost. By the time the men turned, he was already on them, silent, swift, unforgiving. He didn't kill. Not yet. He knocked one cold and took the rifle from the other before tying them both to the fence. "Still clean?" Eleanor asked. For now, they left the men for the sheriff to find. The message wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. The next morning, Danton arrived at her farm with 4 riders and the sheriff in tow. He didn't bother with charm this time. "You think you're clever, Eleanor, sending your new husband to poke around my land." She stepped out with her rifle at her side, barrel down but ready. "You trespassed first. Called me a thief. Sent your men to burn my field last spring. You just didn't think anyone would push back." Danton grinned, but his eyes were sharp. "This is your warning. Next time, I won't bring the law. I'll bring fire." Cole stepped from the barn then, calm as ever. "You've already tried fire," he said. "Didn't take." The sheriff looked between them, clearly uneasy. "Now hold on, both of you." "No," Eleanor interrupted. "You hold on. I want a jury trial. For the horses. For the arson. For the threats. I want it public." Danton sneered. "You're wasting time. Ain't no jury out here but the one I choose." "Then let's see who they fear more," she said. Cole smiled just barely. It was enough. By sundown, the town was buzzing. Folks who hadn't spoken above a whisper in years were talking. And when word came that Eleanor Granger would be bringing charges in front of the territorial judge himself, riding in from the capital in 4 days, eyes turned toward Danton, not with awe, but with calculation. The bluff had worked, but now came the hard part, holding it. Eleanor stood at her window that night, watching the stars. Cole sat outside with his rifle across his lap. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They both knew Danton wouldn't wait 4 days. The day before the judge arrived, a dust storm crawled in from the west, swallowing the sky in rust and ash. It was the kind of omen folks in Rust Hollow didn't speak of, only watched from behind shuttered windows. But Eleanor didn't stay inside. She stood in the middle of the street, eyes narrowed against the grit, as Cole secured the final brace on the church doors. They were boarding it for more than wind. By dusk, word spread that Danton's men had emptied the saloon and loaded rifles. There would be no trial, no arguments before a robed man. Danton had no use for verdicts unless he wrote them himself. Cole lit a lantern inside the church. "He's coming tonight," he said, voice low. "He'll make it look like a raid. Blame it on Comanche or bandits. Then it's over." Eleanor nodded. She didn't tremble. "Then we don't wait." They took positions in the old chapel, now hollowed of pews. Cole had converted the place into a trap, funnel doors, tight sight lines, sandbags beneath windows. Her children were already safe in the next town, sent away with the preacher's wagon before the sun rose. That was the only part Eleanor had insisted on. Cole watched her check the rounds in her husband's rifle. "You still have a choice, Eleanor. If you walk now, no one would blame you." She didn't answer right away. She closed the chamber, slung the strap across her shoulder, and looked him dead in the eye. "I made my choice when they hanged my name beside a lie and left me to swing." They waited in silence. It wasn't long. The first shot cracked at midnight, sharp and unhurried. Then the thunder followed, 6 riders charging through the haze, weapons drawn, howling like wolves. They wanted fear more than blood. They got neither. Cole dropped the first rider before his boots hit dirt. Eleanor followed, her shot slamming into the second's chest and sending him sprawling beneath his mount. The third reached the church steps, screaming, until Eleanor stepped forward, calm as breath, and knocked him back with a shot to the thigh. She didn't kill. Not unless she had to. Then came the fire. A bottle sailed through the window, glass shattering against the altar, flames licking at the floor. Cole stamped it out with his coat, coughing in the smoke. "Back door," he shouted. They moved as one, out the rear exit, down the alley behind the blacksmiths, into the shadows where the street lamps didn't reach. Cole covered her from the edge of a barrel stack, while Eleanor ran to the sheriff's office. She kicked the door open with her boot. The sheriff sat inside, eyes wide, pistol in hand, but he didn't raise it. "Danton's burning down the town," she said. "That fire touches another house, it's on you." He hesitated, pale and sweating. "You don't understand, Mrs. Granger. He'll kill me." "No," she said. "We will. If you don't walk outside right now and do your job." The silence stretched thin as thread. Then the sheriff stood. Slowly. By the time they reached the church again, the townsfolk had gathered. Not armed, not brave, but present. Eyes blinking in the dark, torn between fear and something else. Hope, maybe. Danton rode through the smoke, flanked by 6 men. His coat was open, vest blood-red, face like stone. "You had your chance, Eleanor," he said. "Could have walked away, but you had to drag ghosts into it." Cole stepped from the shadows, rifle resting across his chest. "She didn't drag me," he said. "I walked." Danton laughed, but it sounded brittle. "You think one woman and one dead man can stop me?" "I think one town might," Cole said, "if they remember how." Danton turned, sweeping his gaze across the crowd. "You think I won't bury every one of you?" "No," Eleanor said. "We think you already have. One lie at a time." Then she raised her rifle. It wasn't a call to war. It was a reckoning. The blacksmith stepped forward first, hammer in hand. Then the storekeeper, his apron still dusted in flour. Then the teacher, the banker's son, the preacher's old daughter with her shotgun half rusted from disuse. Danton's smirk faded. "You going to shoot a church full of women and children?" Cole asked. Danton drew. Fast, but not fast enough. The shot rang out before anyone else moved. His gun clattered to the ground, hand bleeding and limp. Eleanor stood firm, rifle still smoking. She didn't shoot to kill, but the story would spread like she had. Denton's men hesitated. The law stepped between, and the town held. By morning, the judge rode in, mustache gray and robe wrinkled from travel. He expected whispers. Instead, he found Eleanor Granger standing beside the U.S. Marshal's badge coal left pinned to the church door. "We held court last night," she told him. "Hope you don't mind." The judge looked around, at the ashes, at the townspeople still gathered in silence, and at the man shackled in his own saddle, glaring down at dust. He tipped his hat. "Reckon that's justice enough." Eleanor never went back to the name Maddox. She didn't have to. Rust Hollow remembered her fine without it.